Hello, everyone. My name is Exuki Z, and thank you for joining us on today's stream. I'm going to be helping us shuffle through the show today, as well as helping lead the Q&A. So if you're on the Discord server, please throw your questions there. If you're on Twitch, throw them there, and I'll be watching both to try to connect the dots and ask some questions. So the schedule was up and will be up again, and I'll also read it off for everybody here in a second. But just setting the tone, what we're going to be doing today is going through approximately, looks like 6 different presentations from a couple of different wormholers, who each are going to be telling all of us about some of their experiences and them offering their insight and advice to people on a variety of topics. We will be taking a couple questions for each of the presentations at the end, but please note that we're going to try to make sure we get through everybody. So we're going to try to keep the ball rolling. So if we end up with a lot of questions for any of the individual presentations, I'll be keeping a list and we're getting back to them at the end. So after the 6th and final presentation by Ashy on wormhole defense, then we'll move into a larger Q&A that can be either just questions about wormhole space, questions for any of the speakers, or if you had follow-up questions from any of the presentations that we weren't able to go to, please hold on to them. We will try to get to everybody. Up first, we're going to be talking and hearing from Sin Alarma, CEO of Exit Strategy, who's going to be talking about playing Find and Seek the Perfect Wormhole. If you're not familiar with Sin, he's a long-term wormholer, having been there for quite possibly almost as long as they've been there. He's the leader of Exit Strategy, who've been around in and out a bit, and they've certainly been around all over the place. And I won't tell you where he's living because I'm pretty sure he's going to do that for us. But he's going to be talking about how to find exactly where you want to live. You ready, Sin?
I'm so ready, mate.
All right. Well, without further ado, here's Sin Alarma.
Yeah, g'day, ladies and gentlemen. So what I'm going to try and do is cover my presentation in quick time, and that will allow more time for questions, or indeed for one of my peers to go over time later on. So, yep, essentially my presentation is about finding the perfect wormhole. So people may not know, but of the 7,800 systems that are in the game, just under a third are wormhole space. So if you ever think that high sec, low sec, or null sec is potentially too congested or it's too dominated by particular powers, just remember that just under a third of the game is wormhole space. So we've got about 2,500 systems. Only about 100 and I think it's 106. I wrote it down somewhere. Is actually uninhabitable from a structure point of view. The rest of them, you can put structures in, you can build up, and you can either live there individually, small groups, or dare I say, bigger. So that's a good place to sort of get your head in when you're thinking about, I guess, finding the perfect wormhole. I've got a really good dead guy quote at the top there in some fancy writing, but without further ado, we'll kick on. So, in my mind, there are only 2 reasons to live in wormhole space. One of them is PvP, and the other is PvE. They are not mutually exclusive in any way, shape, or form, but the first thing you need to do before you find the perfect hole is to work out what it is you want when you want to get into wormhole space and find one itself. Now, PvE in wormhole space sits there. There's gas, there's combat sites, there's data relic, and there's PI. I've deliberately left mining off the list at the moment because quite frankly, until CCP does something to change mining in wormhole space, gas mining is the closest you're going to get to that style of play that is unique and I guess worth your time and risk. No matter which avenue you go down, PvP or PvE, it is all about statics. So try and break yourself away from the fact that you need J123456 as the system, although that would be a pretty cool wormhole number to live in. Everything is about your statics. You can't PvP unless you are able to connect to someone, and you certainly can't PvE correctly unless you can get the stuff you're doing out or indeed use the statics. You'll also find that in general terms, it can be quite claustrophobic trying to PvE in the one wormhole, and you'll tend to want to be able to exploit your static if you want to PvE in more than sort of one person at a casual gamer rate. Statics all about size and mass. And I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of that, but certainly could if we get to it. But essentially, it dictates whether or not you're going to be using capitals. Now, I know you can build capitals in any wormhole for sure, but it's certainly a determiner if you're going to be PvPing or PvEing, whether or not you use caps, depending on the your actual static itself. And then you've got your logistics chain. I mean, naturally, anything you're going to do in wormhole space, you're going to be able to bring new ships in, bring new doctrines in, replace stuff you've lost, and indeed take out the loot that you've made from whichever style of play suits you. Now, these are some of the bits that may not necessarily come naturally to people. So your system size is actually quite important. So once you've identified what you're going to do in the hull and what statics would suit you, having a look at the system size is quite important because that will affect your ability to descan your entire system, so identify threats early. And it'll also affect your warp time. So if you are trying to get to the fight or trying to move from site to site and get those sweet dank ticks, naturally, the system size is an important aspect when you're looking at it. And that can actually narrow down the amount of systems that are available to you once you've identified what statics sort of suit you. Planets linked to PI effectively. It won't affect a system size. It doesn't really affect anything else, but certainly if that is something that tickles your biscuits or your members' biscuits, having strong PI in your hull can certainly make it a lot better. And naturally, with planets comes moons. At the moment, other than anchoring a pos or mining some incredibly low value ore, moons are serving a limited purpose in wormhole space at the moment. They do look super pretty. Oh, now I should have had another little spot that popped up there that actually spoke about the system effect, but that's okay. I can talk to it. If you imagine there was a little bubble somewhere on the screen that said system effect, that'd be great. Essentially, your system effect will very much determine what you can do in the hull. Most hulls are what we call vanilla, so there is actually no effect at all. It doesn't benefit or nerf ships in any way. But then there are a number of other effects that can actually occur in the hull. I would say if you are only just getting into wormhole space, vanilla is your best bet, just because an effect will make you very predictable in what you're going to do. And those of you that don't know, it also may limit some of your PvP options, although certainly it could buff some of your PvE options. Now, with all that said and done, and like I said, I wanted to try and get through in quick time. Once you've found the perfect hole, or maybe you've got a list of perfect holes, you'll probably find that a number of them are taken. And if you don't have the ability to go and take that hole off somebody, well, maybe when you first get into wormhole space, you don't need to settle for perfect. There's a couple of really good third-party links that are out there for you to get in and find that hole. So Anoikis is an amazing website. It's down there on the bottom right. That allows you to jump on, sort by system, sort by static, sort by effect. It'll then list, the system size. It'll give you the planets, the moons, and the like. And it'll even give you a Zkill link where you may be able to try and ascertain who potentially is using that hole quite frequently. And with all good final pieces of advice, there are 3 ways once you've identified, the top 10 holes that will suit you or your group style of play. There's the good fast way, and that is simply you pay someone. You can pay Wingspan, you could pay other wormhole groups to actually find that hole for you. And naturally, you could even go a step further and argue that should you find the hole you want and there are people that you can't take, I mean, there's an option there to pay someone to get it done nice and quick. There's certainly the fast, cheap way, which is you find a hole with a static that goes to this class of space that your perfect hole exists in, and you start rolling. Now, that's certainly cheap, and it could be fast, depending on your luck and endurance, but I would argue it's pretty demoralizing and therefore not good. Or there's the cheap good way, and that is simply you just sit there, you watch Z kill, and as soon as a kill pops up in that hole, you quickly combo the 2 people and see if the chain's available. Ladies and gentlemen, that's my little Jove talk. Ready for some questions?
Thank you so much, Sin. That was great.
Anybody got questions for Sin while we've got him here up on stage, so to speak? I haven't seen any on Discord or on Twitch, but that doesn't mean people just haven't sent them in.
Am I supposed to be looking somewhere for them, or do they get read out to me?
I'll read them to you, Sin. I know that you have your hard of eyesight at this time of day. We understand.
I also just like hearing your voice. I could see one on Twitch.
Yep,
Is it possible to live in a wormhole solo, or do you need a corp? You certainly don't need a corp to live in a wormhole. I would say though that anything in Eve is better as a team. Like absolutely anything would be my argument there, mate. But certainly there are people, and there are definitely the concept of farm holes where people live in a hole with alts or sometimes their mains, and they make ISK that way. Certainly very vulnerable though.
Do you have a favorite wormhole effect, Sin?
Ooh, I do like Pulsar, which is a shield buff and an armor nerf. Although currently we're living in a Wolfrayet, which is the inverse. It is a armor buff and a shield nerf with a few other effects in there. So nuding in the Pulsar effect is quite interesting, and in the Wolfrayet, it's very small weapons that do a ridiculous amounts of damage.
Do you have recommended places to go to buy and sell wormholes besides Wingspan? And also, do you have an idea of what the average go for a wormhole is?
So to answer the second part of the question, no, I actually don't. I mean, I've seen ridiculous amounts. My rule of thumb has always been it's only worth the value of the assets that are in the hole. So if someone's trying to charge you tens of billions for a wormhole and is only giving you an Astra house, then maybe you're not such a great negotiator. And then to answer the first one, look, I believe there are Discord channels available. I'm not privy to any. There is certainly the Praise Bob Discord you could go to. I probably wouldn't use Reddit, and there are certainly the EVE Online forums, which I think are a better source. But no, I don't have anything other than I've found Wingspan to be incredibly good to find something within a week or so.
Do you believe it's possible for a wormhole corp to live and get everything that they need from within wormhole space without going to trade hubs?
That is not possible with the current mechanics. That is because the ore available in wormholes would not allow you to produce the array of ships at the moment. Unfortunately, only the minerals that are available in HiSec are available in wormhole space, and they're certainly at a reduced amount as well because you don't have asteroid belts off the planets. You just have random SIGs that appear. Yeah.
We've got a couple questions about the size of the wormhole. Can you go into a little more detail about why you consider the system size to be a relatively important thing to look at when choosing a new home system?
Yeah, I definitely can. I actually personally believe this is one of the most overlooked aspects when ascertaining, which wormholes are good. So those that use DScan know you've got 14.2 AU across to look. So if your wormhole is greater than that from one side to the other, you may not be able to detect things that have decloaked or arrived in your system, or may already be in your system and have logged in while you're ratting or chilling out, chatting with your mates on the undock. So that's the first one there, is that initial detection of what's going on. Additionally, let's say you are ratting or you're rage rolling for PvP. If a new SIG appears and it's outside of your D-scan range, you have limited intelligence other than, hey, there's a new SIG. Whereas if you do have it in D-scan range, you can identify if probes have come out, what sort of probes, if a Helios or whatever has jumped in and then cloaked up. Naturally, if it's outside of your D-scan range, by the time you get there, the threat may already have disappeared. The next bit is if you have particularly large systems like your 100 AU or greater, it's actually feasible for someone to make very easily deep safes inside your system and have entire fleets able to log in, prepare themselves to drop on you, which is generally referred to as a log off trap. Now, there are some other ways you can do log off traps, but that's probably for a different conversation.
All right. Let's see. What are your thoughts on the Marauder changes as for how they've impacted wormhole space?
It's great for me because they are a ship that gets stuck in a system, and so anything that's not going to run away as soon as we open a new signature is good for me. The 30 seconds is really quick, so you've got to be on your game. I liked that you could see Marauders prior to the what was it called, surgical strike patch. They lost a lot of utility in Wormhole space with the resistance nerf. So it's good that they're back. Like, it's certainly a good idea. They're kind of like a mini Dread in ways. So I'd say good, both from a hunter point of view, but certainly those that want to get in and run those beasts.
All right. Well, so any further questions, I'll be taking down as notes, and we'll get back to them at the end, but we're going to continue rolling up. So thank you very much for your presentation, Sin, and all of your answers to our questions. Up next, we're going to have a presentation on rules and organization by Leo Dormer from Ronin. Leo is a relatively newcomer to EVE, joining the game itself in 2019, where he's been in Wormhole space flying with Ronin for almost that entire period of time. But he specifically has a very strong interest and amount of experience. He runs a business himself that he owns, so he's very familiar with building something up and putting pieces together, and especially the people pieces. So he's going to be talking to us about, from a kind of corporate organization and leadership perspective, how you go about setting up boundaries and organization for your group for success.
Yeah, thanks, Iksuki. I really appreciate it. So hey, y'all, my name, or my fake space name, is Leo, and I get to talk about rules. And this is something where, I know there's some EVE groups out there that like to be really cool and edgy and not have any rules. But I think most of us are adults, and frankly, the 13-year-olds who EVE are probably smart enough to know that that's not how it works in most situations. I think rules are kind of the difference between, being a really well-trained group of monkeys, trying really hard to do the right things, and then totally failing. Instead, rules organizations are what allow us to set ourselves apart and become this glorious ape army, effective and even sometimes intimidating, even if it's just a game. So why do we have rules? One, EVE is a social game. Same thing Sin pointed out. It's more fun as a team. Two, EVE can be annoying. It can be tedious and frustrating. And rules and organizations are what make it more fun, less tedious, less frustrating, less annoying, and they help us get along with each other as people. So what are rules? Rules should be universal to your group. They should be all-encompassing. They should describe who you are at your core. They should be how you recruit people and how you decide what group you're going to be in. They should not be microscopic or nitpicky. You don't want to have 87. You want them to be few and important. Two, rules should be uncontroversial. So these guys are totally cool with wearing blue and white and red, it seems like. But this group of people definitely finds red and white to be pretty controversial. So it's going to depend on your group what's uncontroversial. So how do you choose it? There's a process in project management that you can use, and it starts with brainstorming. Formalize it. So gather your nerds up, tell them how it's going to work. Make a dedicated chat channel if you don't already have your core rules. Make a channel in Discord. Call it #brainstorming. And then have everyone type your ideas without reading the others. It doesn't matter if you write the same thing 3 times. It doesn't matter if you write it well. It doesn't matter if it's even a good rule. Just write what comes to mind. And then sit down together, collect your ideas, and graph them out. So there are certain rules in Ronin's. This is one that's uncontroversial to us and it's universal to us. Be nice to each other. And we share this rule with a lot of other groups out there. Maybe not so controversial or uncontroversial would be this one. Pizza must have pineapples. I'm told that some people don't like this. So my personal group, this would not be controversial, but maybe for some of you it is. And then we have some that we see in some EVE groups that maybe aren't the best core rules. This is one that's more controversial in Ronin's because we like to fly a lot of nano, cheap stuffs get blown up. But it's a little too specific to the situation. Same thing with our bookmarking system. We have a bookmarking system we love, we use it, it helps us a lot, but not a core rule. It's too microscopic to one particular aspect of the game, not to who we are as a group. So this is where organization comes in. Best practices do not have to be rules. Nitpicky is okay if they make complicated tasks simpler. And controversial is okay if it's better to have some method of doing something than none. So there's a lot of things in Eve where you kind of have to do 20 things in order correctly the same way every time, or you're going to screw something up and frustrate yourself or make something annoying. It's nice to have a standard way to do that. And there are some things where the same group needs to do it the same way every time, because that's how we all stay together, even if it's not the perfect way for everybody. So best practices should be written down. We have a library channel. We keep pins in there. They should always be followed until amended. So I don't care if you don't think this is the right way. Follow it until you argue for a change, until you convince people otherwise. We're a group. We have to be a team. We have to follow the same rules. The same best practices. And then rules should always be open to amendment and improvement. As the meta changes, as people get creative, thank you, frankly, to the rest of the speakers in this group for driving that change in a lot of cases. We should be willing to unpin something, leave it in the archives, and move on to a different method of doing something. So in terms of rules, remember still, it's only a game, but winning is fun. So here's my contact info, and if you have any specific help you want to talk about your group or problems you're having, always happy to talk. And yeah, I'll take questions.
A lot of commentary on this one, but I haven't seen very many questions. But for sure, if anybody's got questions for Leo, he's here to answer them.
Tell me about some of the commentary. I'm just looking at the Discord.
There's specifically a good amount of chatter about pineapples on pizza and minimum of 10 guardians to undock.
Good. Yeah, right. I mean, I think we can all agree that those are not good, like, core rules for most Eve groups. We're groups of choice, right? But on the other hand, might be helpful. So,
all right, we got a couple questions here. How would you suggest handling personality conflict or disagreements amongst leadership?
oh man. So yeah, what I just said is important. We're groups of choice. If you really can't get involved or can't get along with someone over a long period of time, it's probably not the right group. And we can go separate ways. I mean, Ronin's has a rule that we make our friends orange and we shoot our friends. And I think we should all play Eve that way, right? We don't have to be in a corp together and trying to run something the same way where we keep butting heads. We can go our separate ways, enjoy our separate play styles, and still be friends. If you're having really deep personality conflicts, probably don't want to be spending this much time on a Discord with somebody. On the other hand, though, I always favor communication and talking it out. Looking up the idea of nonviolent communication, which is so ironic to talk about in Eve, a game about shooting each other's spaceships. But look it up. I mean, start out with coming from where you're coming from. Don't be like concluding things about the other person's motives until you get to hear what they are. Right? I mean, that's probably a good place to start. Listen first, talk second. So.
All right. How do you go about enforcing rules in a group that's supposed to be casual?
Well, so Ronin's rules are pretty simple. Be nice to each other. Like, be excellent to each other is our first rule. Casual playing groups should be able to respect that just fine. Number two, now why am I blanking on our rules? But anyway, you get it, right?
Very memorable rules, I guess.
Yeah, I know. No, I started thinking about our tax rule. It's a very simple, right? And it's an honor system. You pay 15%, on certain things. It's an honor system, right? And if you find out someone's not doing it, then you kick them. And if not, you don't worry too much about, perfect enforcement. The second rule is basically, I'll mix it up because it's part of be excellent to each other. Frankly, our second rule is no politics. Easy in a casual playing group. We're not here to talk politics and get serious. We're here to escape from real life. So things like that can be really helpful. So it's all about who your group is and who you want it to be. Best practices is probably more what Pablo was asking. And that's a harder one. I mean, I think it's just kind of polite reminders. You'll find in a casual playing group that people get really annoyed if people are causing them more time or more trouble to do the kinds of things that are fun in the game, even in a casual playing group. So I just think like reminders, and then if somebody's really having an issue following it, a director's job is to take them aside and talk to them about, look, what's going on here, and if if you can't, we're a casual group, we have like 6 best practices, and you can't follow those, probably not the right play style or right group for you. You might find a different casual group where you get to do it your way.
Have you found that when groups try to cooperate, friction or grudges might develop when they end up having different sets of rules?
Yeah, for sure. And that's a hard one, right? Like groups that allow political discussion versus groups that don't. Groups that allow certain types of speech that other groups might consider hate speech. Those are tough. And in picking your friends is something Dark will talk about more, but you know, you might need to have a talk as directors about, hey, let's go with kind of the narrowest common denominator, meaning, hey, we might allow a lot of freedom for our people, but we're going to be doing an op with someone who has stricter rules about the types of speech that are okay. We're going to follow their rules on this op. That's going to be the rule. Otherwise, you just don't work together. It's same kind of thing, right? I mean, it's a game. You don't have to play together. You can play together by shooting each other's spaceships and not talking.
How would you suggest going about adding API tracking into a corporation that already exists and did not have such scrutiny in the past?
Oh man. So first of all, the tech stuff is, you know, slightly beyond me, but I think I know what this means. It's basically using something like Seat and tracking assets, things like that. Um, I think the process I went through about, brainstorming rules or best practices could be uh, a good. I mean, it's not the perfect process to use because brainstorming isn't right. But maybe uh, have a discussion as directors first. Do all the directors support it? If so, um, then bring it to the members and say, give them kind of the opportunity to talk to the directors individually and say, do you support this? And even if you don't support it, are you okay with it? Here's the reasons for it. And if you feel like you don't get enough buy-in and you're going to lose people for it, you probably don't want to do it. And if you feel like you can do it and the people who decide they want to leave are, not core members, friends, right? These are our friends. And maybe it's not uh, such a bad deal, right? I mean, if one person who never shows up on comms is going to be pissed about API tracking, they're probably your spy. So cool. I think if that's it, might move on to the next one.
Yeah, I'm trying to read through and make sure I didn't miss any, I'll say, serious questions, because there's a couple that I don't think we need to actually answer here.
I'm going to have to go back through and read the Twitch chat after this.
All right. Thank you very much, Leo, for your presentation and your time. Coming up next is the self-proclaimed best wormhole mapper tool presentation by Chingy Chonga from Pos Party. If you're unfamiliar with Chingy, he's been a long-term member of Pos Party, and he's a developer at heart who has built his own wormhole mapping tool that he's going to be coming on to tell you all why it's better than whatever you're using and going out and showing off a bunch of its features. Yeah, you here and ready, Chingy? I'm only hearing popping noises every time Chingy mics up. So best mapper maybe, best microphone definitely not.
Yeah.
Are you back and ready to go, Chingy?
Probably going to be the best option to move on to Darkfire. Are you ready to go, Darkfire?
Yep, I can go.
All right. So,
Oh, Chingy's back.
Oh, Chingy's back. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yay.
Okay. Can you still hear me? Sweet. I'm going to talk until you tell me you can't hear me anymore. All right. So I'm Chingy Chaga, creator of Galaxy Finder, and I'm going to talk to you today about using this as your tool for mapping New Eden.
Yeah, probably best option here is to just let...
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Let's try this.
Okay, we'll try that.
All right. So, what is Galaxy Finder? Well, let's start with why does it exist. Wormholes were originally created not to be lived in. So software was created to properly handle tracking your systems and connections so that you know how to get back home and what's available in systems. Now, Galaxy Finder was created as a signature-based wormhole mapper, which automatically tracks your map based on the signatures in your systems. Now, to start, we have signature scanning and mapping. Now, this allows us to basically just paste in the signatures from game anywhere in the page, and it will automatically list out your signatures in a list for each system that you have selected. Each system then allows you to either click home, setting the system you came from automatically, hovering, showing the details, or just editing it to add more details. We also have connection statuses. Connection statuses show us things like how much mass is available on the hull, what chips can go through it, what kind of connection it is it EOL, how long will it live. Now, our blue connection here will show us stargates, our green connection will show us frigates, our red connection will show us verge of collapse, and orange will show us stage 2, and dotted lines will show us EOL. Now, we also have overlays that allow us to mark connections as either do not enter or save mass to let people know that we're trying to save those connections. And then finally, we have an automapper. The automapper is unlike other systems. It doesn't make any kind of assumptions. This is automatically designed to say you jump through a system where it was from a system on the map to a system that's not on the map. What signature did you jump through? It will automatically filter out the ones that are not currently selected as the type that you just jumped to. You select it and it automatically updates it. Next, we have Intel tools. Intel tools are designed to let us follow what's happening in chain. We map out our systems, but how do we find our content? So things like structure timers, you can automatically put in things like what structure, what the timer type is, when it happens, who owns it, and it will show up in a big list on your drawer showing you all the ones you've saved and your current time locale. Then we have capsuleer locations. These locations are updated both on the browser side and server side, meaning that unlike other systems, if the person doesn't have the browser open, all their alts will show up. Even if they don't have the browser open, all of the people will show up in the system as long as the system is still running. The locations on client side handle your own so that they update quickly and allow you to jump locations reliably. Site tracking and allows you to set signatures as cleared or triggered so that people know that they can jump in without getting shot and do the 15-minute timer of clearing before they run away. System pings allow us to ping a system. It animates it. Hovering over the little icon will give us the information like who said it, what time it was set, and what the message is. We have system effects, so you can hover over it and see what kind of effects are in the system. We have drifter flags. You can say how many drifters were spotted in the system so people know when to pay attention to things that are in the system. And we have notes. Notes allow you to write notes for your group or privately. It uses a rich text editor, and you can enter in all the information you want, and it will always show when the system is selected for anything that is visible to you. And finally, the other one is Pathfinder. Basically, you open it up, takes all the K spaces available in your system's chain, and automatically shows you the destination's distance to the destination that you choose. Hovering over each box will tell you the name of the system, security, how many kills and jumps happened in the last hour, and right-clicking on the boxes will allow you to set navigation in game. Now, the biggest intel tool that I created was the Kill Tracker. Kill Tracker was specifically designed to allow you to track what's happening in your chain as it happens. Things like any kind of kill that happens in a system and chain will appear in the chain feed. The chain feed shows you what died, who died, what they're affiliated with, the number of each ship on the kill mail, and the affiliation of the person that was the killing blow. As they happen, you'll get browser notifications if you have them turned on. The system will flash red, and the bulb in the right-hand corner will flash red until you open the intel panel to read the details. The system filtered view will show you the last 6 or so kills that have happened in the selected system, and then you can just go through. It doesn't matter if you've been notified or not. And then finally, we have some things like for customization for people that want to use it their own way. We have the route setting, which allows you to set the destination that's automatically populated when you select a system that is a K-space. So you can put whatever systems you want, and whenever you select a system, it will automatically show up in your destination routes down here. We have customization for the system nodes that appear. System nodes will automatically have a temp ID and an alias. Temp ID is automatically wiped out the second the system is removed, and the alias is there forever until you change it. The temp ID is right here. It automatically defaults to the signature, and the alias defaults to the system name. But as you change it, it will update the nodes in the map. Settings allow you to set up backgrounds, custom backgrounds, in the default tab that is selected when you load the mapper. And then Stargate auto mapping is a system that when you jump a Stargate, if the original system you came from is on the mapper and you jump through a registered Stargate, it will automatically add that Stargate to your map. Now, this doesn't assume that there's a Stargate. It's based on what is in CCP's system as a Stargate. And then security. Security was one of the things that I built from the beginning. It doesn't require refreshes for thing to update. So if you were removed from a map, it automatically disappears from your view. Your affiliations chain, you drop corp, you token drops, those tabs will automatically disappear. I've also built access lists, allowing you to set up things like read and write access to share maps with people like alliances, corps, or specific characters. And reading access just means they can only read it. They can't modify it, delete it, nothing. Same with notes. When you create notes, you can select what kind of security is available for people to view. So Alliance, Corp, or Private. And then the affiliation-based system, I update affiliations for everybody in my system every half hour. It's every hour for ESI caching, so I do it short, half the time to make it quicker. It automatically drops maps based on your affiliation as it happens, no refresh required. So there's a lot more, but I don't have much time. So here are the links to the site. The release version is the first one. The dev version is where I push work in progress, things to get feedback on, people test stuff. Account management is my custom account system that it runs all of my dev stuff. It handles scopes, only asks for what you care about, and revokes tokens when new things are added. And then I've open sourced a ton of things, not specifically the front end of the mapper, but the back end, microservices and stuff like that are all open source. And I just created a Discord for people to join, see change logs, and talk about it.
Well, I think that looks great, Chingy. So the number one question that we had during your presentation was around what can people host by themselves. I think you probably covered it, but several people still specifically asked if they can host their own version.
Yeah, so I expected this question. It's very hard to host. It is not able to be self-hosted, mainly because it's built on cloud infrastructure. So things like Firebase real-time database, Kubernetes, BigQuery, Cloud Functions are all used for this system. So it's not like a self-hostable thing. I actually spend anywhere from $250 to $300 a month to keep it running. It's also designed so like all that security and stuff, like sharing access lists and things, is required for everybody to be on the same instance. So it makes it harder to self-host.
Can you speak a little bit to the data collection or lack thereof? A couple people are commenting or asking about what sort of information is kept on your end for other people that are using your mapping tools.
Yeah, so any details that are removed from the map are automatically deleted. It saves me money because the less data being stored, the better. The only thing that actually is stored are analytical data, like how many signatures are scanned, stuff like that is mainly dumped into BigQuery for analytical use for like data sheets for I was going to open a system where you can request analytics for your corp. I don't look at any of that data. It's actually terms of service. Like if I do break that, I can get all of my ESI access removed and permabans, stuff like that. I'm very, very careful about that. But I try to make sure that if it's removed from the mapper, it's removed from my system. The only stuff that's kept is analytical data.
Trying to catch up. There's a lot of chatter here. I think we've covered. Here's a good question. Do you have? Can you speak to what you're currently working on adding to the mapper, assuming it's still under active development? Are there more features that will be coming out soon? Whether that's UI, entire new features, a different way of sorting SIG IDs. Those are just a couple of the things people tossed out there.
Yeah, so actually I just released an update last night. I added in rebuilding chains. So like signatures never expire in the system, meaning that they're always there. So when you come back to the system, when you paste into it, it will automatically select the ones that are no longer there so you can easily delete them. That also means chains aren't automatically rebuilt. And a lot of people had issues with this. So I added a feature where you can rebuild connections, which automatically right-clicks, rebuild connection, automatically adds all the wormholes that aren't currently on the map that are in your signature list. It retains connection statuses too. The next thing I want to add is a follow mode. When you turn it on, basically what happens is when you jump into new systems, it will automatically select that system on the map. The map will automatically scroll to that system in view. And when you use like AutoMapper and stuff like that, it will resolve the system and auto-select it as well. I have some other things that people have requested, like collapsing chains and things like that that I've been looking into. But like I have a pretty good list of things that I continuously work on and improve, updating dependencies, UI improvements, cleanup, stuff like that.
What led you to wanting to build your own mapping tool?
My original desire was along the lines of every single Eve tool that I see is built on PHP and like jQuery, and it's really bad. And they hit the database every 5 seconds to see if things changed, and it was super slow and it didn't work great. And the second that people started using it, it got very, very slow. So I wanted to build something that was built on like new technology, good cloud infrastructure, scalable, stuff like that. And I have about 4,000 active users built into the system right now, as far as I can tell. and it doesn't slow down. It's not like Public Pathfinder where it starts slowing down. Updates are real time. They don't require me to ping the system. It's all WebSocket based, based on Firebase, and it was more along the lines of the desire to build something to a new standard that people enjoyed using and was easy.
All right, and I think the last question I'll ask you, I'm positive that this is something that's probably answered as soon as people start digging through your website, but one, confirming that there's no ads, and two, how much does Galaxy Finder cost?
Yeah, so Galaxy Finder is free. Anybody can use it. There's no limitations or anything like that. There are no ads either. I was pretty adamant about making it available for anybody to use, built openly, and not charging for it.
Well, there you go, everybody. Going off of a couple of the questions, I think people assumed it was expensive. All right, well, thank you very much, Chingy, for that presentation and all the time answering questions. If anyone else has follow-up questions for Chingy, we'll circle back to them at the very end of our sessions here. Coming up next is a guide to wormhole space diplomacy, which is going to be presented by Lord Darkfire, CEO of Ronin. If you're not familiar with Lord Darkfire, him and a bunch of his Ronin crew have been around wormhole space for quite a while. They've changed names a couple times, but Lord is certainly not new to wormhole space or the political landscape of it. And he's going to be joining us to talk to us a bit about probably both what's going on now and maybe a bit of historical information too about how things maybe used to be. But I know this is one of the highly requested discussion topics of the political landscape of who's and what's going on and how he goes about doing all of that. How are you doing, Laura?
Well, no pressure there.
Set the bar high.
Thank you very much. So just want to go over some wormhole diplomacy. My presentation is mostly focused on my approach to making friends and contacts with folks. And that's really what we're going to be focusing on. There are some discussions of historical rivalries and political landscape and so on. So in fact, let's just go ahead and move straight into that first. So wormhole politics explained, right? As Yoda would say, permanent political complications there are not, right? I've lived in high sec, low sec, null sec, and in wormhole space, and as seasoned wormholers know, you're going to have a new neighbor every day. That means it gives you a unique social structure of interacting with folks. In that, unlike null or low sec or high sec, you don't have permanent neighbors. Therefore, you don't have this constant permanent friction. You don't have these resource wars. You don't have any of that, right? You're going to have new folks every time, which is, I think, one of the biggest charms of living in wormhole space. But on a social level, that also allows you to make friends with folks. And by friends, I don't necessarily mean blues, but you get to know them and to not have permanent enemies. In order to survive in wormhole space, and as I've learned from political history in wormhole space, is that you don't want folks to develop grudges against you, and you don't want to hold grudges against anyone else. You want to have a good time. You want to go fight. You want to go lose ships or kill ships. That's all perfectly good. But you don't want to have those permanent enemies that will hold grudges against you, and etc. Because you do want to survive in wormhole space and just have fun with your friends. That's really what it boils down to, right? So the nicest thing is that today you're friends with someone and tomorrow they're going to be on the opposite side of a field. Let me give you an example. Quantum Inquisition was this one alliance, I think they're still around though, where they were getting evicted a couple of months ago. And Ping went out to various corporations to come help them. We were one of them. We went out to help. Exit Strategy, Sin Alarma here was one of the folks who was evicting them, along with Wholesale, led by Renesis Khan. And we were on the defense side. We helped them form the defense and organize them a bit and all that. Eventually, Cindy and Turbo and a couple of others came in to help, and we ended up winning on the defensive side. Fast forward a couple of months, maybe a few weeks after that, or maybe a whole month, we decided we're going to go ahead and evict Quantum Inquisition. And so we connected with Turbo, we connected with Be Nice, with Weebs, and we went ahead and started eviction. And guess what? The people who ended up defending him were Wholesale and Exit Strategy this time. So the sides completely flipped, pretty much, right? Because that is the nature of Wormhole space. It's not about holding any kind of major grudge. It is simply a matter of convenience. I'm sure you all have seen those memes, right, where the police officer is holding a little baby, that's high sec, and someone's kissing the Godfather's fingers, that's null sec, and then there's some shirtless guy with a big Christian cross on his chest, golden cross, and he's in low sec. And then Wormhole space is all about that chaos, that Mad Max kind of chaos. That's really what our political thing is. Now, that said, though, there are corps that develop those grudges, and they have this long-term kind of battle with each other. Take a look at TD Sin and Hard Knocks. They've been at each other's throats for a long, long time. And what ends up happening with those is that, for me personally, I don't play a video game to hold grudges with against folks, and if someone holds a grudge against us, it just becomes a nasty kind of feeling, right? And it becomes a long-term conflict. So diplomacy is going to be about trying to avoid, for your small or medium-sized Wormhole group, try to avoid those sort of situations where you don't have any permanent enemies, etc. Right? So the beauty of Wormhole space is anyone can be your friend if you just try. You just need to have the right approach for the most part. So let's talk about the right approach, right? The right approach is you got to break out of your shell. You are not your character, and your character is not you, because diplomacy at the end of the day is about making authentic human connections. It is not about spying. There's a spying aspect that people take, and that's perfectly fine. It's a valid sort of gameplay. But the way I approach it is diplomacy is not about spying. It's about making those authentic connections. And let me emphasize this with a short story. When I first started Ronin ONE, there were a bunch of corporations who would bully us because, I was like a two-man corporation, and they were these big bad six-man groups who would come and try to evict us and so on, and because they knew we were weak. But I went to eVegas in 2018, met a lot of these folks who were now part of other groups, and we knew what happened when you talk to these people in real life. They cannot role play being an asshole, excuse me, but they just can't, because they're real people. They're looking at you as a real person. They're interacting with you as they would normally would in their real life. That veneer of role playing completely melts away. It falls apart when you meet people in real life, and that really helped pop my mind open as well. Is that folks are just role playing, right? They're not really just being jerks in real life. They don't hate you. They're not malicious. It's just a way for them to have fun. And if you realize that, then all you got to do is break yourself out of that mindset as well, so that you can approach them in a real life kind of mindset. So my recommendation is, when you're doing diplomacy, be your real self, right? We have real feelings, we have families, we have lives outside of Eve, and we want to bring that a little bit into our interaction with other folks in Eve. So think of it like this: the common but experienced Eve mind is besieged by suspicion of the stranger, because betrayal is a valid and oftentimes glorified gameplay mechanic, right? People would subconsciously slip into this suspicious mindset as soon as you approach them out of nowhere. So help them break out of that mindset by reminding them that you're a real person. Look at the pictures up on the slide. These are some examples of three of our folks, right, including me. I'm up there with my kid. Leo's up there with his wife, and there's Shaq. There's a reason why we keep these pictures up, right? It's because we are staying true to who we are. These are our actual people. This is our real life, and that helps people make that genuine connection. So when I approach folks, I'm not simply Lord Darkfire, the CEO of a PvP corporation. I'm a real life person who's playing a video game, and I want to talk to you. It's kind of like that, right? I conduct all my diplomacy through Discord. Trying to get people on comms really helps. It's not necessary, but talking to them brings that real audible tone. They can pick up your emotions. They can connect with you better. And then, of course, keep your Discord profiles as real as you can. Now, you don't have to do this if you're not comfortable doing it. That's totally cool. But this is the way I approach it, right? You don't have to give out your real name if you're not comfortable because you were afraid of getting AWOCs or so on. That's totally cool. I often say, I'm an attorney. I'm in Houston. I practice here, and because that is part of my real life, and they can understand that when I'm going to be online, when I'm not going to be online, and that's totally cool. Now, once you've prepared yourself to break out of your shell, what do? You join every single Discord that you can ever find. Now, there are a couple of folks I know out there who don't like joining Discords. I have too many Discords. I don't want to go there and blah, blah, blah. That's fine. That's the way I want to play. But they're basically, in my view, they're crippling themselves on a diplomatic stage, because the more folks that you can reach out to, the better, right? Think about it like this. If you are ever in trouble in a forest, would you rather be there with 6 friends, or would you rather be in a crowded mall with 1,000+ friends and acquaintances and you shout out for help? Right? That's really what it boils down to. Now, do you want to get stuck in the drama of one group of friends who are upset at Becky for being a bore at a party, even though there's this great movie out that you've been waiting for? Well, if that's the case, if you have lots of friends, go ask your other group of friends. Go out with them, right? So the way I do it is I trawl through Eve jobs, less than 10 Discords, Eve forums, in-game recruitment channels, anything that way I can find Discords, and I join them immediately. And I approach them and I start talking to them, right? But and the way I talk to them too is also pretty straightforward. So let's go through that too. You got to be friendly. But you got to be strong. So if you're cheery, you want to use your positive vibe with them, right? Everybody loves serotonin. Be that positive vibe in the day. Write with exclamation points, laugh, smile, etc. But after you say hi to them and you kind of explain to them why you're here and what you're doing, then you should drop it down to seriousness. This is what I do. It's like, but don't get me wrong. We will shoot you in the game wherever we find you unless we're on ops together. I always say that, right? And then I bring it back up and like, hey, because that's how friends play a PvP game. It's like FIFA or Counter-Strike. Yay. So when I do that approach, I start friendly, drop it down to seriousness, bring it back up to happiness. It makes them think, well, I guess this person doesn't want to add me to a blue donut. What do they want? What do they want? They have that question in mind. What is your purpose in talking to me? It's easy. You want to offer gifts. We want to host NPSI, for example. Ronin ONE hosts NPSI every now and then. This helps develop our corp relationship, CEO to CEO and corpmate to corpmate, because at that point you are having your members hang out with other members. And as a CEO, one of the nicest things that I like is someone coming up to me and saying, hey, I'm going to give you and your corp free content once a month if you just come hang out with us. And as a CEO, that takes burden off of me, that I don't have to find content. I don't have to make sure that my corp mates are being entertained. This really helps, right? So this, you can get into good graces with other folks as well by doing that. And also, there's this thread in some Wormhole or Corps, or actually really in Eve, where knowledge is kind of hoarded as if it's some sort of super cool secret thing that you don't want to give out, because if you do, you're going to lose some sort of power. Don't do that. Don't be like that, right? If you know a cool trick, if you have uncommon knowledge, share it. They'll find out from someone else anyway, so why not collect the brownie points for yourself instead? Have a superior wormhole mapper? Share it. Bookmarking system? Share it. Doctrine? Share it. Because you're taking advantage of folks who don't have enough knowledge. You're giving them that knowledge to reap long-term rewards, giving them that sort of knowledge that they can use every day, right? And they're gonna appreciate it, and you're gonna earn their goodwill. This is the way to make good diplomatic relations with everybody. So, well, what do you do with this good diplomatic relations and all this goodwill? It'll really help you when you're a Wormhole corporation and now you are about to get evicted. Oops, went too far ahead. Okay, so during diplomacy, here's what you really got to do. During an eviction, sorry. I'm seem to having some technical trouble. All right, so number one, please do not invite the whole world to help you defend your wormhole if something like an eviction happens. there are plenty of examples of where Wormhole corporations call Ronin ONE, and they call a couple of others, and then they call 10,000 more other corporations. And once we found out that other people were coming, we immediately refused to come, because at the end of the day, we're paying our Eve subscription to have fun. If we have 10,000 people on one side that are just coming to defend you, and there's like 40 people on the other side, it is not fun for anybody, right? Not just that, but there can be political complications. You don't know, as a defender, as a local resident of the whole, who is friends with who. You may not know who's had some sort of drama recently, and then they end up shooting each other. There are a couple of evictions where this has happened, where people have betrayed each other pretty recently. They were pretty famous on our Eve as well. So you don't want to invite the whole world to help you defend your home, right? Another thing is, please just invite one or two corporations or alliances and rely on them to escalate with more bat phones. And this does a couple of things for you. You will, first of all, be guaranteed that no one's going to betray each other, right? Or almost guaranteed that no one's going to betray each other. If the corporation that you've invited calls their own bat phones, they're already friends with them. So you won't be calling, for example, Ronin ONE, and then, I don't know, let's say Quantum Inquisition, because we evicted them. You don't want to call us both for defending one wormhole. They may shoot us. So that could create complications. But if you invited us, and then we went ahead and called someone else, like Foxholders or whatever, we know that we're going to get along and it'll be all right. So just invite one or two corporations and let them escalate as they need to. Having lots of friends allows you to select for time zones. So if your time zone if your Citadel time zone is going to be falling under European time zone and so on, then you have European friends that you can call in, right? And so on. So that's really helpful. And then finally, never lie about how poorly prepared you are, and be conservative about the number of players you can field on your own. So, and this is directly from one example where this was way back when Mighty Beans existed. Ronin and Mighty Beans went out to defend some folks. I don't even remember their name exactly. And this person was like, yeah, I have 10 people and I have some ships to hand out, but come on in and we're going to go there and we're going to defend. And I think Hard Knocks was directing them. So we went there. We brought in the entire fleet in, and we saw the Citadel, and the Citadel number was 2. It was just one guy, and he had his one friend with very low SP. There were no 10 people. He didn't have any ships to hand out. But he lied to us because he really desperately wanted help. That was very upsetting. Now, if he had been upfront, maybe we still would have come. If he had been upfront, we would have done it. But the fact that he was deceptive really, destroyed our trust with him, destroyed our belief that this was actually going to be worth doing. So we literally got up and left. And we exited the hole. We said goodbye to Hard Knocks, and Hard Knocks said, "Oh, well, rip," and that's it. The guy lost. So be very, very honest about how much resources you have, and if you're unprepared, say that. It's okay. People will still come to help you, because at the end of the day, people are paying subscriptions to Eve to go pew pew. And if you're giving them free content, they will come. Don't give them money for that, but offer them some SRP if you want. But this is where diplomacy really comes in to help. And then finally, the question is, what is best in Eve, right? And there was supposed to be a GIF here, but apparently it's gone missing. What is best in life was Conan was asked, and he said, to hear the lamentation of the woman and crush your enemies and so on. Here's my perspective of Eve. You can destroy an enemy, or you can take their guns away in your favor. And to me, that's the best in Eve. That's the ultimate diplomatic, quote unquote, trick that you can do, is convincing your enemy to be your ally. There's nothing better than that. But yeah, and with that, I will turn this over to any questions and answers.
All right. A lot of chatter about, people you named, events that you named. Not a ton of questions so far. So if anybody has questions, please throw them out there. One from earlier in your presentation was, what led you to wanting to very quickly turn around and go evict someone that had previously just helped in a defense that you were on?
Oh, sorry, I think I got disconnected. Could you repeat that?
What made you decide to turn around and very quickly go evict a corporation that you had just previously been helping defend?
Yeah, so a couple of things really. One was that lots of our friends had become very offended about a a certain person who was in their corporation, and then they pinged us about it. They were like, "Hey, let's go evict these folks." So first, I tried to convince Quantum Inquisition to drop this person from their corp, but they refused to do so. And since most of our friends were going to go there, we decided to go ahead and do that anyway. This person that they were talking about was had some very controversial uh, um, perspectives about Black people and about Nazi Germany. And this is what is going to attract folks to come evict you if you have that sort of controversial opinion. So we decided we're going to go help our friends.
How do you go about trying to keep everybody on the same team when you call in two groups to come help you and they don't like each other?
Yeah, so if you are a local that is being evicted, and you have two friends who don't like each other, be upfront with them. Talk to them. Say that, hey, can I go ahead and invite XYB group, and listen to their perspective. And then if both of them say no, or one of them says no, then you have to choose which group do you want to invite. You can't have this expectation where you're going to invite two groups that absolutely hate each other, and somehow for your sake they are going to put their guns away. Don't do that, because you know what's going to happen. Even if they do put their guns away against each other, right as soon as that thing is done, they will turn on each other. Or if someone starts drama with each other, it's going to go down pretty bad. So you have to choose. You gotta decide. Pick one group and ask them to bring in friends.
Have you ever dealt with people before that simply had no interest in any form of diplomatic connections?
Yeah, so when I join every single Discord server I can, right, I would say about 80% of them give me a positive kind of response. 10% of them just don't respond at all. And then 10% of them just kind of listen to me like, nah, we're not interested in talking to you. And that's fine. There will be some folks who are like that, and that's totally okay. Your job as a diplomat is to find more friends. And like to say, you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, kind of thing. So if you're out there, you're being positive, you're trying to develop relationships, and some folks just don't want to talk to you, well, then they just don't want to talk to you, and it's fine. Find someone else.
Have you noticed that the average group size in Wormhole space is growing? And if so, has it affected how you go about diplomacy?
Yeah, so ever since Alliance Bookmarks came out, there has been a consolidation of a bunch of corporations joining one giant alliance, living together in one hole, perhaps even in several different holes. And I have noticed that trend. So it really depends on what your objectives are, right? What kind of group are you? Are you a C2 N5 corp that really does all the nullsec PvP? This is your 95% of your PvP is outside the nullsec. Then you really don't need to glue up with a large group. If you are a C4 corp that has some known enemies and you want more strength, then you want to bring in more groups to live with you. That's perfectly cool. Some folks do that. And then I've also seen some corporations joining other corporations temporarily while they quote unquote get their feet back up on the ground. And that's fine. But at the end of the day, you have to understand what kind of wormhole you're living in, what your objectives are, and then go out and meet those ends. If you want other corporations to join you in your wormhole, you got to have really good diplomatic relations with them, not just on a CEO to CEO level, but on a corporation member to member level, because you want your friends to get along with their friends, and you want them to integrate because you're going to be living together, sharing this common space, sharing this common bookmark system, and so on, right? So you got to have much more closer ties with folks if you want to glom together with other groups.
All right. Thank you very much, Lore. That was great. And thanks for your presentation and the time answering questions. We're going to keep on rolling. Coming up next, we have Maldavius and Teddy, who are going to be presenting on how to FC. If you're not familiar with either of these guys, Teddy's been in Wormhole space for quite a while under the name of Teddy. He's been in both Shekel Squad and is currently in Foxholers, and I believe he also did a stint in Sinner's Trajectory. And Maldavius has changed his name a couple times, but he's also been out here for quite a while as well, throughout many different corporations and many different names and faces. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to these two.
Hey guys, here I'm just going to talk to you about sort of getting into FCing, going over some of the newest doctrines, sort of talking about the meta, and then a few sort of off-meta doctrines as well. And then Maldraxxus is going to be talking about sort of more guerrilla tactics and sort of more going into how to defend your wormhole. So why should you listen to us? We've been in W Space for going on 5 years now. We've both been CEOs of different corps. We've both been head FCs and FCs in those corps. We've also participated in some of the biggest sort of wormhole fights in EVE. So, the first sort of thing that you want to do when you're looking at a fleet and trying to come up with a doctrine that you want to do, you want to know the ideal fleet composition of that fleet. If you're running like a typical heavy armor fleet, you know that you need a DPS core, logistics, and support. You need to know the minimum that you can undock in terms of how much DPS you need to actually break something, how much logic you need to actually hold, and then always, honestly, leverage E-War. It's one of the most powerful tools that you have. A lot of times in a fleet composition choice, in Wormhole space, a lot of people multi-box. And a lot of people try to multi-box both Logi and DPS at the same time. It's honestly, it works for some people, but it's honestly not a good choice for anyone to really do it. Logi just takes too much attention, and then you just fall behind on DPS. Or if you try and do DPS, then you fall behind on Logi. Either just do DPS or just do Logi. Especially if you're FCing. If you're FCing, you should just be FCing. You shouldn't be trying to sit there and alt tab to a Guardian and try and keep someone alive. Also, with like critical roles inside of the fleet, your anchors, sort of Logi FCs, Logi anchors, you need to make sure that those are done by people that you personally can trust, that you know will make the right decisions. You want to make sure that they don't just YOLO your Guardians into the middle of a vehement to just get webbed and die. The second sort of main point of FCing, you can be like brand new as long as you just keep talking and repeating what you want them to do. Stuff will happen. Whether it's a good or a bad call, doesn't matter. As long as you're talking, your fleet members will have confidence that you're doing something right and that you're making a decision. If it's a crap decision, it's a crap decision, but you can deal with that later. Don't let your own nervousness seep into your own voice. If they hear that you're nervous and that you don't have confidence in the fight that's coming, they won't have confidence in the fight that's coming. They might not undock. They might not risk things. No, sorry, I had a cough. With the sort of main compositions of heavy armor, the sort of main doctrines that you're going to use in Wormhole space usually has a DPS core of sacks, T3s, although T3s are trash right now, don't use T3s. Command ships that can either be sort of damnations or absolutions. Then you have the sort of the humble Drekavac that is really good up until sort of about 20 people. Then you have the sort of you have an Ikatersa, really good, also really expensive. Fulfills really niche roles. And then also you have the Lashak, It's an absolute monster for DPS. Ridiculous tank. But can also be neutered out, and it's really, really vulnerable to both E-War and Tracking Disruption. Then for your Logi, you've got your Guardians, you've got your Zarms. Zarms are really good for sort of anti-Triglavian fleets, where they will ramp up, but your Logi will also ramp up. And then you've also got like Nessus, but Nessus are also really vulnerable to being sort of like boosted, or they can't really maneuver at all around grid very well. So they're very sort of vulnerable to neuting and being boosted on. Then you've also got the sort of T1 Logi cruisers. If you're just starting out, maybe go for like a Sacrilege and then T1 cruisers. Then you've got your support options, you've got your Scorps, Vindicators. Vindies do insane DPS, bring amazing webs. Nothing's going to get away from a Vindy once it's on top of it. You've got your heavy interdictors. They are really good for sort of anti-booshing and also just keeping the entire fleet there. You've got your interdictors. They're really good at sort of just temporary tackle. Just warp sabers in, sabers are ammunition. Throw loads of bubbles down and keep everything locked down until your fleet can sort of arrive and secure tackle. And then you've also got the Balgorn, brings insane newts, and it's sort of a key to any fleet really. You want to have newts. Then you've got your sort of your shield options. The Drake Navy issue is really sort of coming into its own nowadays with the hand buffs that was earlier in the year. They do insane DPS. Drake Navies can push almost 1,000 DPS now, and sort of the entire sort of concept of shield has got a lot better over the year. You've also got your command ships, usually a Nighthawk. Some people do use Sleipnirs as well. They bring obviously links, but they also do quite a lot of DPS on their own. You've got your sort of your Ravens, your Gilas. Ravens fit with Torps, doing insane damage. Good tank. Then you've got sort of Phantasms. Phantasms do a sort of slightly different thing with Shield. They're more of a sort of kite fleet. You'd run them with Simmies and maybe a few other little bits of support, and just try and kite around grid. Same sort of deal with Logi. You have your sort of your T2 logistics. You've got your Bazzi Simi and your T1. There doesn't really exist a sort of Nesta variant for Shield. And then obviously your support again. You can run Shield Balgorns, but they're only really good inside of Pulsars. Fal, you here?
Oh, right. Yeah, I'm going to take over at this point. And so we're going to talk about some guerrilla warfare tactics to use in case you are on the defensive side of your wormhole and say you're being shot by people that are outnumbering you. How to help regain hull control back for yourself. So guerrilla tactics are probably the best way to do that if you're outnumbered. First thing, you can use bombers to do that. You can use T3 destroyers, assault frigates, and boosters are almost a necessity. You take two boosters, you warp it at 100 kilometers, and you time your boosters about 4 to 5 seconds apart. You spearfish their main fleet off that wormhole when their jumpers or when their rollers jump back in. Then your main fleet of bombers or whatever ships you decide to use, you burn down the rollers. And whenever we were doing the quantum eviction, and we were on the defensive side trying to get allies in, we used this tactic against Hosel, and they only had one roller left at the end of the day, because we had killed everything else that they'd used. So this was a huge tactic to use to regain hull control, which we did end up being able to do because of this method. And it just took 4 to 5 hours of slowly burning them down constantly to do this. And so it works out very well. You need to make sure you have a cloaky dictor on standby that can warp to the wormhole. So as soon as their rollers jump back in and their fleet has been moved away, you bubble up, you capture that roller, you kill that roller with your fleet, and you warp that fleet back away. You basically rinse and repeat this until they've lost majority of their rollers to where you can regain hull control relatively easily. And at that point, you just kind of commit. You commit your entire fleet on the next hull control flight, and assuming you've killed enough of their ships to gain that hull control, then you've successfully defended your wormhole at that point. Whoever has hull control is going to win 9 times out of 10. And keep that in mind when you're on any kind of defensive or offensive side. If you lose hull control, 9 times out of 10, you've lost. So just bear that in mind. Next thing that I would go out with is force multipliers. So that's going to be your capitals, dreadnoughts, and faxes. My daughter keeps hitting my keyboard. So even though you may not yourself be able to use dreads or faxes very well, if you can at least fly the hull, I would always recommend you have some in your wormhole to hand out to any bat phones or allies that you may have. Just because you can't use it well doesn't mean that your allies can't use it well. Those faxes and dreads are huge multipliers when it comes to defending your wormhole or regaining hull control. If you're living in a wormhole that they cannot escalate with caps in, your best bet is to put a shitload of carriers or dreads on that wormhole with faxes to support. There's not many subcaps out there that are going to beat a fleet of hull dreads. And that's just the way it is. So always keep those on standby if you're able to financially do that. If you're not, I would strongly encourage you to make the ISK to be able to do it. They don't cost that much money, and they are huge in terms of eviction fights. Can you go to the next, Teddy?
Yep. So this is sort of more about sort of know your fits, knowing this sort of meta, and you can sort of chase the meta. I honestly wouldn't recommend chasing the meta. Try and make your own doctrines if you can. If you know how to Pyther and do any sort of that, any of that, try and do your own thing if you can. It's okay to sort of look at fits, look at their sort of general concepts, look at what they're trying to do, and then sort of try and adapt your style to that. Because what works for other corps might not work for you, and just trying to copy paste their fits might not work out. It might not work for your SP. It might not work for your pilot skills. On the screen currently, you've got the rough idea of the two current heavy armor meta and the shield meta. There are a few other sort of off meta fleet concepts going around at the moment. You have the Foxtrex that we use mainly. They're designed as sort of a massive hit and run doctrine. They don't have logi. They're remote, like they all are. They all remote rep each other. They're all nanoed, and they're designed to sort of get in, hit something, and leave very quickly. You also have Wormhole. They're a 2/5 null corp. Their sort of heavy armor is Guardians and Abaddons. Well, they'll just sit out in a hall or come through and just shoot lasers at everything that moves. Right. That's mainly the entire presentation. Any sort of questions?
I'll hit on one. Vlad asked if faxes or dreads are more important to get, knowing they're expensive for a smaller corporation to be able to afford to purchase, and only going to get a few, and you want the best force for your investment. So, in my opinion, in that, Vlad, faxes would be your best bet if you're talking just surely pure lower numbers, etc. Faxes are the best bet because if they can't kill you, you're going to win. Right? If you can kill them, if they can't kill you, you've already won that fight. So, in my opinion, faxes are the strongest investment for a small corporation to make over dreads.
And I just saw another question from Nakamakazi. How many doctrines do you have that you want your members to have? We sort of have a hard limit of 5 or 6. After that, we try and either retire a doctrine or work it into another doctrine. We don't like having too many. We usually try and have a doctrine that can fit any sort of reasonable scenario.
So we did get a good amount of questions. We're going to try to keep moving along because I think we're a little behind schedule. And I also feel that a lot of the questions, although great, are extremely situational. And we could probably go very deep into a rabbit hole of which of these is better or which of these would be better for this situation. So I think we're going to thank Teddy and Maldavius for their presentation on Fitz, FCing, and Wormhole combat. We will have time for Q&A at the very end if people want to continue to just ask, toss all the questions and see what people feel like answering. What we're going to wrap up with is the final presentation for today. Is we have Wormhole Defense, which is going to be getting presented by Ashley Trainer, CEO of Foxholers. Teddy's also from Foxholers, and if you're unfamiliar with their group, they somewhat recently successfully defended their wormhole against a relatively large alliance of people coming to try to make them not live there anymore. So they're going to, well, they being Teddy just shared a bunch of his insight, and Ashley's going to be sharing hers on what they learned and their recommendations or insights that they want to pass on to everybody else. So, are you ready to go, Ashy?
Yeah, I'm ready. Just waiting for the stream to be set up with my presentation on there. Oh, cool. Right, okay. My browser must just be behind them.
All right.
Okay.
And floor is yours.
Cool. All right, so hello, everyone. As Ixuki said, I'm the CEO of Foxholders. Teddy, who you've just heard, is my fiance. He's sitting behind me right now. And yeah, here's a few reasons why I should even talk about this. And you can see they're pretty negative reasons at first. I've burned out a bunch of times, my corp has died a bunch of times, I've lost evictions before, I'm usually unprepared for things, and I beat Whole Control in a Wormhole Defense once. Generally unsuccessful most of the time, but yeah, I beat them one time. But my point here is that you only really need to have some knowledge of game mechanics and an idea of what you might face to prepare. The key thing is to prepare, and we'll see that going forward through this presentation. So the first thing, home defense is going to be what are you going to face in home defense, and the thing I want to touch on mostly is the mental side of things and the general timeline of what's going to happen. Because it's not all about the fit, it's not all about what you undock with, because there's a whole lot more than that. It's, for starters, it's going to be 3 or 4 days of just needing max nerds online. You're going to need everyone you can get online at all times. If real life gets in the way, then so be it, but otherwise it's going to be a hella stressful 3 or 4 days. And that 3 or 4 days comes from the Wormhole Space Citadel timers. So when you hit a structure, it's going to take a day and then through to the next reinforcement timer, and then another day and through to the next reinforcement timer again, depending on when you have them set up. So usually people will hit you on a Thursday, and depending on if you go to final timer, you're going to be fighting through to Saturday or Sunday. I think there are some cases that can go slightly further, but that's generally what you're looking at. It's going to be a lot of scanning. You would have heard in the previous presentation some mentions of Whole Control, which is in not the group, the actual taking of control of a wormhole. We'll go over that a little bit. And it's going to be a lot of scanning, racing against hostile scanners, trying to not get your pod thrown out, right? Because once your pod is out of the wormhole, you're out of the wormhole. That's one less ship in the final fight. That's not good. But if you can do that to the hostiles, that's another good thing. And yeah, if when it does come down to it, it's going to be probably the biggest fight in Wormhole space for that month at least. Eviction fights are big. You tend to get at least one-on-one, like max forms of 2 corps, and more likely 2 or 3 versus another 2 or 3, just depending on how many are attacking and how many bat phone, and how open the connections are. And you do sometimes see these evictions where barely anyone keeps hold control, and you get just all of the big high-class corps showing up to a single wormhole, and you get this massive throwdown. That's really interesting. And yeah, the final kind of mental thing there is just it's going to be a difficult time. It's going to be a lot of anxiety, a lot of uncertainty about the future. People who don't have log-off freighters worrying about their assets if they die because they're going to lose them all. There's no asset safety. But yeah, so we're going to move on now to in a whole control scenario, the main 3 arenas, I've called them here. And in no particular order, you've got fighting on a wormhole for hull control. You've got Citadel defense itself during a timer, and you've got scanner races. So I'll start from the right actually. With scanner races, this is what's going to be going on when there's no battle going on. Right, so when you're not fighting for hull control, when you're not fighting for a structured timer, your scanners need to be scanning that wormhole. Their scanners need to be scanning that wormhole. Because if there's not an established fleet guarding a wormhole at the time, then it's most likely just been rolled and there's a new static which has just popped up. As a defender, you probably want to try and scan that as fast as you can, get as many bodies in as you can for your timers. They probably want to do the same. And the reason why this exists, why it tends to turn into this scanner race, is because of the fact that hull control fights themselves are very, very dangerous, particularly for the defenders. They are what will define an eviction, as was previously mentioned. If you can take hull control, you can get people in. You can really, really push the odds in your favor. But if you're a defender, you fight on a wormhole, you don't have the power of your Astra, your Fortizar, or what have you to help defend you there. You don't have instant reshipping. You may be fighting in a massive field of bubbles. In fact, there was a particular time back in when we had a C2. Hard Knocks were evicting us. This was 2020, no, 2019. I can't remember. It's over a year ago anyway. And we had tried to take a frig fleet through a frig hole to take hull control of the hole in there, right? So we were going to try and get pods in through that hole, but it just didn't work because Hard Knocks and Laserhawks had artillery lokies set up on the wormhole in a field of 100 to 200 kilometers of bubbles, and our frigate fleet, which was intended to get in through that frig hole, just got torn apart. And it was lucky that we were actually on the outside of the bubbles, so that we actually managed to warp our pods off and save them for what would have been the final fight, although it turned out to not be one at all because we just didn't prepare. And speaking of final fights, you've got the Citadel defense itself. So this is the big bit, right? This is the big fight that everyone hears about. So during an eviction, there's going to be the whole control and the scanning going on at all times. But there's also going to be the actual defense itself, that armor timer and that hull timer. And there's a few things to know about that. For one, it is going to be everyone needs to be online, like I've already said. You need to get this timer sent out to your corp in advance. Everyone needs to know about it. Ping it 10 or 20 times. And we'll go over fits in a second, but another key thing is just make sure that you've got a good Citadel fit. Make sure you've got a good doctrine designed for fighting on your Citadel, because you will be. But it's just a simple fact of home defense. You're going to be fighting on your Citadel, and you're going to be fighting with the power of a Citadel. But we'll go over that. This is a bit of a wall of text, but just a few notes on best practice. Yeah, don't risky scanners. That's again a point of don't lose your pod. Don't lose your pod because you're not going to respawn in the Astra or the Fortizar. You're going to go out to Jita. That's not good. If you're taking a scanner out to try and get an entrance, make sure it's not door stopped. If the hole's crit and nobody's watching it, there's likely a battleship on the other side that will close it as soon as your scanner goes out, and that's GG. That's one person gone. You should always be looking for ways to roll hostiles out. That might, for example, be if there is a door-stopped hole and you're quick enough, maybe you could trick them and roll that crit hole with like an alpha clone. An alpha clone that doesn't matter, roll the hole and your hostiles have lost one of their rollers, your hostiles have lost one of their pods. That's an advantage to you immediately. Another bit of best practice on that topic is to keep the attacking fleet busy, and by that what I mean is just keep scanning, keep thinking they're active, that you're active, sorry, and tire them out, make them have to play, don't give them an easy time. But then eventually, I can't say when you should do this exactly, but at some point you need to then perhaps go quiet. If you know this really active scanning isn't working, go quiet and let them relax. Let them log off. Watch their Astra numbers. If they have a staging citadel already, watch their POS numbers. Keep eyes on them. Wait for them to all go to sleep if you know their time zone, and then go as hard as you can with everyone that you can. And maybe go for hull control. That's another great thing to do. I've got a note here on not burning your bat phones, keeping your allies happy. This goes off of something that Law was saying in his talk, which is to do with who you bat phone to come and help you. You don't want to bat phone the world. I've seen people do that before, and it just sucks when. And I've done it before. Like I've been on the side of it where I've called loads of people, and it's not a good look. It does just suck because it feels like, you know, you're not special to them, you're not helping them really, they're just wanting you as a number, and you tend to piss off your bat friends that way. And yeah, just on bat phones, make sure you've got spare ships if you get them in. Getting pods in is a lot easier than getting a doctrine in. And now on to potential hostile fleets and ships that you might end up fighting in a home defense scenario. And there's not that many of them really. And the key theme here is that it's probably going to be something that tends to be used in nullsec, but maybe take it up a notch in terms of quality of fit. It's not going to be like T1 fit Feroxes, it's going to be more like heavy missile sacrileges or artillery Lokis. Maybe it's going to be a Triglavian fleet of Leshaks or even Ikitursas, which were popular for quite a while. And fighting each of these separate threats means designing your doctrine with a few of these notes that I've put down here. Designing your doctrine to counter these, whether it's through refits or through the initial design of the fit. But a lot of it comes down to a couple of key points, which is it's going to be nullsec style fleets. You want long range, if you can, and you want alpha damage, if you can. Because there's very little that's going to save you. Like if you've got, say, blaster battleships or vigilance or something as your home defense, well, the hostile fleet's just going to stay at 50 kilometers or 100 kilometers, and GG, you're not going to do anything. If you don't have alpha damage, that's another thing. If you've just got maybe some high DPS doctrine, well, what if your hostiles have prepared for this and they've brought along 15 guardians as as hull control did against us? They had something like 12 or 13 guards. So yeah, they're my two key points there. You just need to make sure that your doctrine is long ranged and alpha if you can. And we'll go over that in a second. I've got a few example doctrines. Yeah, what should a defense fleet be? So I've already said you might need to do alpha damage. That's just one-shot damage. You might need to fight at long range. You can rely on your Fortizar to be there, so design that with your design your doctrine with your Fortizar or your Astra in mind. And probably a lesser looked at point is to make sure that you design your doctrine with price in mind, because you may need to stock a lot of them. If you've got battleships in particular, well, thanks to frigate escape bays, battleships are very easy to reship, which is fantastic. So if you can wait out your weapons timer, you can get another ship and keep fighting. Something we did a lot in our defense. And if you've got a doctrine which is, say, 2 billion ISK per ship and you think you're going to go out swinging, well, what if that falls flat and now you've got nothing spare? What if you happen to get 20 or 30 people in? Then, you know, how are you going to give them a ship? Because I doubt that everybody can afford 60 or 70 billion of faction battleships. One of the ways that we did this was by using a Praxis fleet. Part of the reasoning behind having the Praxis fleet was purely because it was so incredibly cheap, and it was actually around Eve's birthday that we put that together. So we just redeemed them straight in the hull for free and got the fits in for very, very cheap. And we could assemble an entire doctrine of dozens upon dozens of these ships for like less than 10 billion ISK. It's great. And it meant that during our defense, anyone who came in, we could just give them a ship. If we'd done the same with, say, Scorpion Navy issues, that would have been a bit more difficult. It's not to say that you can't have something expensive, just keep it in mind. You need to have that stock. You need to be able to hand it out to people. You need to be able to reship if you die. And I've got a little note on here actually, which is you don't need Logi if you can reship. And that's a particular thing which happened during our eviction, where we just decided, fuck it, let's go out without any kind of Logi at all, and that seemed to work. Anyway, we're going to move on to a few of the example doctrines here now, and I'll explain this. So the first one here is the classic. I say classic. It's the one that we used. It was our armor cruise missile Praxis fleet. High alpha damage, 250k plus range, supported by nesters if you need them to be. Just generally good. And what you're also going to see on there is just some other alternatives as well, which is there's some Abaddons on there and there's some Gnosis on there, which are something I've recommended to a very, very small group, because what's quite funny is if you want to, you can actually field something like 50 Gnosis for 5 bill. You could do that instead, heavy missile Gnosis fleet. And if you're like an Alpha Clone Corp, maybe that'll work instead if you're really extremely poor. And the Abaddons, funnily enough, Abaddons, if you're within 10 kilometers, work a lot better than a Nester do, which is an interesting doctrine choice, but it's worth talking about. So that's one example doctrine, and that fulfills the long range, it fulfills the alpha damage, it fulfills the staying cheap part of things. And with a fleet like this, you're going to be able to sit just on your own dock, or maybe off of it somewhere, and shoot and just kill whatever you can. If you can't kill stuff, then maybe dock up and go for as much DPS as you can. Maybe start sprinkling in scorpions or damps or something. But generally this works quite well. Another example of a doctrine, and this is one that I thought about for perhaps the complete opposite end of it. Right, so whereas the Praxis fleet you would have maybe 30 or 40 people defending, the Scorpion fleet you may have 3 people, right? Imagine a scenario where you've got 2, 3 or 4 friends who have moved into a wormhole together. Maybe they don't have the ability to field a ton of the shacks or something. What they could do is they could perhaps rely on the Citadel for DPS. So they could then use the guns on the Citadel to achieve something like 3,000 or 4,000 DPS, and then just jam out the Logi and try and tank. That would probably be quite effective. And again, if they were really cheap, they could use Abaddons, but that's a bit silly. And this goes into a bit of using your Citadel in combination with your doctrine. So a doctrine like this would be designed, like I say, such that the Scorpions would be jamming out Guardians, and your Astra would be the only real DPS on field, which, let's face it, it does work, because if you've got no Logi, you can't tank an Astrahus, right? Doesn't matter if it's only 4,000 DPS if you've got absolutely 0 Guardians, because they're all jammed out by 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Scorpions. And that would work for like 3 or 4 people. Because there's absolutely no point in having this and having a webbing structure, a neuting structure. There's 0 point to this if you're just going to field 3 Praxi or 4 Praxi. You're not going to do anything. So another example of that low scale, like small number of people fleet might be, say, a Dreadnought fleet. This is something that people often think about in terms of home defense. They think, oh, I'm going to get myself some Naglfars, I'm going to get myself a Rev to defend my hull. And it kind of works. Kind of. You've got a couple of different options here. You could go max Horde Dreads, high angle Dreads, and just try and bully your way through. You're going to have a bit of a range issue, obviously, because you're stuck on the undock. And if the hostiles are in a long range doctrine, maybe they'll just outrange your dreads and GG. So there's definitely things to think about here. What you could do, I've mentioned Vindicators on here. What you could do if you wanted is you could include a Fax and some Vindies, hold your targets down. Maybe that could help you out as well. That could even open up a potential for using Capgun Naglfars. So there's something for you. This also touches on where it might be important to actually have an Astra instead of a Fortithar, and just store your nags or whatever you've got in a pos. It depends, because one thing to think about when you're designing your doctrine is how you're going to fight on that grid. Because if you're using a Fortithar, for example, that Fortithar 0 kilometer radius is huge. A long-range fleet could potentially be 450 kilometers from you and still shooting at your structure. So yeah, Dreadnoughts work, but there's a few things to think about, and I just wouldn't suggest them as the be-all, end-all. They're not going to save you entirely, but they're effective in the right situation. Also, to answer a question that I saw someone ask in the chat before, which was, will people come after you for having dreads? I doubt it, really. Maybe somebody will, but it's doubtful that they're going to specifically evict you because you've got dreads. They're not a particularly expensive or big asset, so it's whatever. Here we go. Here's another one. Just carriers, right? There's not much to be said about this, other than, yeah, it's carriers. A lot of you will know carriers work. Send fighters. Good job. Great. It's carriers. I don't think I need to say anything about that. If you can amass carriers, then go for it. This was an original plan that I had in the C2. I was going to form a load of carriers, but this fell flat on its face because I did not have enough people who were willing to buy a carrier for home defense. I only had like 4 people, so it was completely pointless to undock 4 carriers. But if you could, if you can maybe have 20 of them and have some fax or something as well, some faxes, then you're good. Go for it. And yeah, this is 506. Literally any good fleet would work. So Munins, your own Lishaks, depending on range. Sacrileges of your own, even Sentry Ishtars or something would work. Really, you can use anything that would work in Null. It's preferable to stay on the undock if you can, using a battleship fleet. But if you want to, whiz around at 100k with heavy missile Serbs, then so be it. There's no reason why that wouldn't work as a home defense doctrine. It's just perhaps not making as good a use as you could. And yeah, the joke on the Sentry Ishtars, it says pretty old school at this point, which it really is. Final thing was a bit of a meme, really. It'd be quite funny. I'd love to see this. Marauders are immune to ECM burst because they're immune to ECM. Maybe you can just have like 4 Marauders and like 8 ECM bursting Scorpions. Go to town with that. That seems hilarious. But yeah, that's more of a meme than anything else. And yeah, final slide here is just some quick notes on structures, which is just to address a few of the places I've seen people fall down on Astrahus or Fortizar fits. For one, you really have to make sure that you're cap stable. Check it in Python. I always say this to people on my blog. Your paints will actually use a hell of a lot of cap, so will your webs, so will your points. Just make sure that you're cap stable for at least 20 minutes. 30 minutes is going to be the time it takes to kill you, so 20 is a good amount at least. Run the calculations ahead of time against the potential threats. So, if you know that you're potentially going to be fighting Lokis or Sacrileges, find roughly what that fit will be, plug it into Python, and do some simulations of your defense doctrine plus your Fortizar application versus that fleet, and you can make changes from there. Pick a nice burst projector. I've said there as well, burst projectors are great. They're really, really cool. Webbing burst projectors are cool, so are jamming ones maybe sometimes. Citadel damage is kind of trash. Don't expect to have just some missiles on your Citadel and that's going to shrug off literally everything, because someone's going to bring 2 or 3 Guardians and then it suddenly doesn't work. But the nukes and ECM are very, very good. Generally, they're just brilliant. You can pretty much perma-nute and perma-jam like 4 Guardians or 5 Guardians at once, which leads to an interesting situation where if you're assaulting a Fortizar or an Astrahus, you really, really do need to have like an excess of something like 8 guards to ensure that you're going to be actually tanking. And yeah, just design for that. Basically, I have a few posts on this on my blog, but yeah, that's basically it. I'd like to move on to questions if anyone has any. So
Sure. There's been a few questions from different chats. What's your take about artillery versus cruise missiles? Like you said, artillery if you need more alpha for the Praxi, but is there a reason that you use cruisers over artillery?
So the reason that you'd use cruisers over artillery is to avoid coming up against a fleet which maybe gets right on top of you. It can sometimes be difficult to keep distance from perhaps a brawling fleet, and someone could come in with a brawling fleet. Hull control very much landed on our face. Like, they were in Leshaks, but they weren't very far from us at all. We may have still hit them with artillery, but they could have been even closer to the point of missing every shot, and that is just a major worry. You don't want to be in that situation where your entire defense plan is nullified by someone changing where they are. There's another question here in chat. Do I use a staged approach when defending? How do you escalate? And that depends on how serious you are at defending, perhaps, and how much you want to kill. And I've seen it both ways. In our defense, we just undocked everything immediately. We knew that they were here to fight. We were here to fight. We just went in with everything we could from the start. It was that or perish, really. And I've seen other groups where perhaps we've hidden half of the fleet, got the defense fleet engaged, the attacking fleet engaged, and then gone in with the second half of our fleet because it's, been a case where we've had something of a crushing a defending force, and we just want as many kills as we can.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're coming towards the end of our show. Unfortunately, Exuki's had to step away for a real-life situation. We're still relatively on schedule, but we're going to open the floor for about 10 to 15 minutes for any questions that you may have, in particular surrounding any of the guests that have spoken here today. We'll try not to pigeonhole too much, just because this is more of a broad stroke, more of a TED Talk type class rather than a master/expert class. in terms of theory crafting and whatnot. So I'm actually going to start the first question off. I don't remember this being answered. Question for Ashley: how would you defend against long-range bomber fleets at approximately 150 kilometers that would just decloak, align to a BM, bookmark, fire on the station, warp off to a perch, and then cloak as soon as they get yellow boxed, and then repeat over and over again until the structure is dead?
Start anchoring bubbles so that they can't, like, just have a stock of bubbles, right? Just while they're attacking you, just go around, anchor them. You can stay tethered while you do that, I believe, and just anchor a bunch of bubbles. When they warp, they're going to land in those bubbles. If you can have hicks as well that sit on the undock, that's even better. And you just need to lock up the bombers, stop them from recloaking immediately afterwards. And if they can't cloak and they're in a bubble, then they're a dead bomber. Just kill them with anything. Rapid lights or something.
Yeah, and let me just also add in that if they're being if you're yellow boxing, they can't cloak up at that point.
Right. So that's a known mechanic that you if somebody gets yellow boxed, you manage to get a full target lock on them, they're unable to cloak.
Yeah, that's a known mechanic.
Yeah, so I have a question for Teddy and Maldavius. How does one become a good FC? Like, where do you start?
I mean, you start by being a bad FC, really. Just go out there, go in sort of cheap stuff, and just lose fleets, record them, do AARs, find out what you did wrong, what you did right. If you can, ask sort of more experienced FCs to come along with you and just stay quiet, and ask them to let you make the mistakes, because you won't learn. If someone steps in, then you just won't learn. But I would always sort of record them. I even still record my fights, even today, and just look over them again. Just sort of do a play-by-play and see what you did wrong.
I am here. I didn't know I was muted. My bad. If you're going out for skirmishes against hull control or to regain hull control, what I always try to do in those situations, I always try to bring any kind of capital with me that I can bring. Even if it's going to die, if I know it's going to die, if I think it might die, I'm still going to bring it. I'm willing to lose that 3 or 4 billion ISK, and I'll have that capital stuffed full of interceptors, right? So if one of my guys dies, their job is to get to the capital, grab an interceptor out of the SMA, or the capital pilot can jettison one out, they jump in that interceptor, and they warp back away to the Citadel. In the midst of the fight, the hostile FC is probably not going to pick up on what's happening until it happens a few times, and then they might try to keep those interceptors from getting out, but your odds of getting back away from that grid and keeping that pod in the fight is a lot higher than just sitting there in a pod hoping the bubble goes down.
I can take a crack at it first if no one else wants to first. So the way I do it is we always have some sort of ship ready for folks with low SB to be able to fly, and that's usually going to be your Tech One Ebor kind of thing. It's either going to be, if nothing else, just one of those Minmatar frigates that can do a target painter. As long as you have that, you can involve folks in, because see, from my perspective as a CEO, is that I want to grow the corp, and growing the corp doesn't mean that you wait around for people's skill points to increase. Growing the corp means establishing that relationship between folks, establishing those friendship between your corp mates, and you're going to do that if you bring them out with you to go fight and die together, or fight and win together. And as long as you can achieve that, the corporation grows. So have that low SB doctrine ready for folks who do have that very, very low SB. Now, you could have a cutoff saying, we're not going to take anyone between less than 20 million SB or something like that, but have something ready for those 20 million SB folks to be able to fly as well. So as long as you have got that, your corp is growing, and your members are having fun, then it's all a win-win in my perspective.
Here's another good all-around question. Oh, sorry. If somebody wanted to jump in there and finish it out.
I just wanted to sort of add to that. Sometimes it is also just worth taking the risk on some low SP players. For example, we took a newer player. He could pretty much just fly in a stereo. Had like 5 million SP, and 9 months later, he's a director now. Like, he's an awesome dude, and he can fly everything now. Like, sometimes it's honestly just worth taking the risk.
Alrighty, yeah, and I can definitely concur on that. Even if there is a risk of spying, I think that it's always better to try to take the risk and take some of the pointers that many of these speakers have talked about today about growing your group, growing the wormhole space community in general, and expanding their horizons and capabilities. Here's another good question, I think, for everybody here. What is the general consensus with content in wormholes? See, 1 through 4 are pretty much ignored, I guess, at least from this commenter's opinion, along with ore, moon, and gas. What, apart from rolling yourself into a C5 or a C6 in a null static, is there to do?
So can I start off by basically saying that's not really true, because the whole point of living in a wormhole is finding and scanning your content. Like, your connections are constantly changing, where you can go is constantly changing. The reason why we have intel tools and other systems in place is to help us find content. It's not about where you live, it's about what you find.
Yeah, I definitely concur with that. One of the things that I feel like is one of the most underutilized resources in wormhole space is the low-sec connections. A kind of a forgotten mechanic that I think people don't quite realize is that let's say that you get a fully -10 pirate status on your character from going and PvPing in low-sec. You can very easily repair that status back to, I believe can you repair it to 0? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you can repair it all the way to 0. And it only costs you, I think about 650 mil, almost maybe a little bit more than that in tags, at least in today's market, which allows you a large agency of being able to, go fight in low-sec as well. The biggest issue that you have to look out for is the faction police, negative standings, because those are nearly irreversible in terms of time being sunk. But your security status is relatively easily repaired.
Yeah, I mean, we have a null static, and that also has a ton of great content. I mean, if we're having trouble scanning a good wormhole chain and finding fun stuff down our wormhole chain, we just jump out our null static and have totally different types of fights. And so I think that what static you have is super important.
Yeah, let me add to that, is that We used to. So Ronin used to live in a C4 with a C3, C5 static, and we did a lot of Harvey armor brawls, log off traps, and so on. And having done that, I have to say that yes, I see that there is a downturn in the C1 through C4 space in terms of finding content, but it doesn't have to be that way. You can force content. You can provoke it. So, as an example, we once went into the C4 Pulsar, and we got a small corporation to attack an Athenor, provoking a response from the residents. Well, hoping to provoke a response from the residents. Turns out there was a third party that landed on us or on our friends, and they started attacking us. And then we logged in our 19 people and came and pummeled them completely. But that was another gameplay mechanic. You don't have to just merely scan holes and hope that you can come across content. You can force that to happen by reinforcing some citadels. You don't have to go on an entire eviction spree to do that either. You can just provoke that.
And finally, another great question. I'm actually going to ask all of you this. I'm going to go one by one down the line here, and I think this is the one that we're going to close on here. What are you most optimistic and excited for with the Wormhole space and the Wormhole community over the next 6 months? Thor, I'll actually start with you on that.
Thor, are you muted again?
He might well be. How about Teddy? We'll go to Teddy on that.
I'm interested to see what CCP do with their next sort of round of resource changes. They have hinted at introducing something into Wormhole space, or maybe shaking up how resources are used in Wormhole space. So, I think it'd be interesting to see what happens. May or may not be good. CCP haven't got the best track record with dealing with Wormhole space, but it should be interesting.
Alrighty, Shingy, how about you?
I'm weird. I'm like the person that's here for building the things around things that people want or are changed. So I'm kind of excited to see like what people end up doing with some of these changes. Like I know some of the features that I've built into some of my tools are specifically designed around the desires of things people want to know in their chains or outside of their chains, like kill tracker and stuff like that, to help them find content. So I'm kind of excited to see, like, I agree, they've totally blundered wormholes constantly, fucking us over left and right. But it's always great to see what wormholers come up with to counteract what they do to fuck with us, because wormholes were never designed to be lived in, and here we are still doing it, even though they screwed up rolling holes, they screwed up our resources, they screwed up like how wormholes spawn and how often they spawn, but we're still here. So obviously I'm kind of excited to see what we do to get around the next thing they screw up.
Well, since we moved into the C2 with the nullsec C5 static, our focus has mostly been towards the nullsec side. That is where a majority of our PvP happens. So I guess any wormhole changes that ever happen may affect us, but I actually have some anxiety about the cloaking changes that they're going to be bringing into nullsec space, and I want to see how that kind of works out. But overall, though, I'm hoping to see more wormhole corporations move in. This is not anything to do with what CCP changes. I just hope that we get a proliferation of various new corporations moving into C1 through C5 space, so that everybody can have more content, and then maybe that could also bring our attention back a little bit more to our C5 static. But we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I'm mildly optimistic that we could eventually see a resurgence back in wormhole space. The numbers currently are showing that we're on a and a rise in activity, and I hope that we continue to do so through the rest of the year. Leo, how about you?
Oh man, so I'm still pretty new as a character, so a lot of the stuff that I'm looking forward to is probably common to a lot of kind of like, sort of like middle-aged, I guess, not brand new players. I have been really enjoying the small gang meta and how a lot of Wormhole Corps seem to be kind of taking advantage of null static and low sec statics to find that stuff. I even see it kind of come into Wormhole fights. So props to Cow and Adapt at doing that kind of thing. I think they're doing some really fun stuff with Wormhole statics, as are a ton of other small groups. So that's the thing that most interests me.
Alrighty, very cool. And Ashley, how about yourself?
Like you have already said, the industry changes that we may see, obviously we don't know what they're going to do, but hopefully whatever happens brings more people into Wormhole space, whether that be if mining suddenly becomes good, I don't know, or if maybe even also groups choose to start doing industry in Wormholes, because truly having more people in Wormhole space is just great. More people means more content and more fights, more activity in chain. It's all just really, really good stuff, that would be. I'm not particularly afraid of what they'll do, because we always do get over things, if they're bad, if they're good, whatever. But yeah, also in the immediate future, I'm excited to see more Marauders dying after people read my blog and then don't use the refit for the Drifter and they think they can kill it.
I'm pretty excited to hopefully find some more Marauder kills in C4 and C5 space as well. Okay, and finally, Sin, what are you most optimistic about Wormhole community or Wormhole space in general over the next 6 months?
Yeah, gosh, it's always difficult to go last. Everyone said so many good ones, because I agree with the potential like revamp of some sort of mineral or resource type concept in Wormhole space. I mean, I'd love to be all anonymous and be. We're probably overdue to do another eviction, so I'm pretty excited for the next fight. But I would say, on a more positive note, if this war in nullsec truly is coming to finish, probably we'll see a lot of fair weather players trying to find new places to conduct whatever it is they like doing in the game, and there's plenty of space in Wormhole space, so maybe we'll see those people start setting up, and I think that'd be good to see lots of new groups propping up around the place over the next few months.
Well, once again, I totally agree, and looking forward to everything that the future may hold in terms of a bright future for Wormhole space. So I'd like to thank all of our guests coming on today. Obviously, Exuki's not here. He got pulled away with real-life stuff. This was a phenomenal show. This was originally... The idea was put together by Lord Darkfire and Ronin ONE. And I had decided to work with them to try to get them the audience that they deserved for the hard work that they put in. As a follow-up for this show, Ronin ONE will be hosting an NPSI fleet out of Thera, if I remember correctly.
Correct.
Yep, and they are... I'm pretty sure they're pre-staged now. There's quite a few people there. I know that I have a character there ready to go. If you guys want to come join us in if you guys want to come join us on the MPSI Rome, come into the Ronin ONE Discord. If someone could link that in chat channel, that would be great. So that way everyone knows where to go and how to get there, because unfortunately that keeps linking to TIS stream. So if you guys want to come along with us, come on over to the Ronin ONE Discord. If not, stick around. We're going to go ahead and raid Ron USMC while I finish up the show here. This has been Jove Talks, presented by Ronin ONE. Thank you to all of the speakers and the audience again. You guys have a good rest of your evening.
Thank you for hosting us.